What's going on, guys, and welcome to episode 3 of This Week in the Shop. That's where we sit down here at the table at the end of every week and talk about any weird, interesting, or expensive things that happened inside a Mopar shop during the week. Now, if you didn't know, I'm a Mopar technician that's been doing it for quite a while now. I think this is year 16 or so. So as we've done the past few episodes, I've kind of taken pictures of interesting or expensive or weird things that have happened this week in the shop, and we're gonna sit down here and talk through them all. Now, if you guys saw from the title of this one, change your oil. That's a good reminder, even if you don't have a vehicle with an engine full of sludge. But our first one here is a 3.6 liter engine. This one had some weird issues initially, and it was not me working on it, but it was an interesting thing in the shop. But it was a 3.6 liter engine in a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I believe it had a overheating issue or something. Again, I wasn't the one working on it, but cylinder heads were replaced on that vehicle and it was sent on its way, but came back shortly after with some oil pressure issues. It was finally, torn down further and found it was very, very sludged up on the bottom end. Again, the top end wasn't that bad. When you pulled the valve covers, there wasn't really any horrible signs of sludge, but again, these pictures here are of the lower end. In the oil pan, it had thick pudding type consistent sludge in the oil pan. That is getting sucked up into the oil pickup or clogging the oil pickup, or then getting into the oil pump and causing a lack of oil pressure. And modern engines absolutely are oil pressure dependent for all of our variable valve lift, variable valve timing. There's just tons of oil passages feeding different cam phasers, or again, different solenoids for different oil fed things, that if there is a oil pressure issue, whether it's a bad oil pump, or in this case, a really sludged up engine, yeah, it's going to be expensive, whether you're attempting to clean that out with different chemicals, or in this case, it got a new engine. This person didn't own the vehicle its whole life. They had bought it used and unfortunately were past the short stick here with a sludged up engine. Again, this thing got replaced. I don't remember if they had an extended warranty or what the circumstances were, but regardless, it's a big job and very costly on whether it being you or that extended warranty. So that's something to always think about on buying used, is you have no idea of the previous life of that vehicle. The oil filter was even sucked in, hourglass shaped in, if you will, due to lack of oil changes. It was probably somebody who bought the vehicle and never changed the oil. It got traded in, sold, whatever, and someone else unfortunately bought it, and now it's getting an engine, and hopefully this new engine now gets treated properly and doesn't end up in the same issue. Here was a very weird one that I have never seen in my 16 years. I had a Jeep Cherokee, not a Grand Cherokee, but a little Cherokee, in for an oil leak. Now, that's not unsurprising. We have oil leaks, whatever. But during my inspection on this Jeep Cherokee, and it was all-wheel drive, and Jeep Cherokee, I'm talking 2013 was our first year, correct? 13 or 14 and up, the new small body Jeep Cherokees. The rear axle housing is put together. It has a very large snap ring on the side that holds it together. Contaminants, corrosion, what have you, had gotten into that snap ring groove and physically split the rear axle case at the seam, more or less. That snap ring pressure was able to push the side of the rear axle housing apart. Now, was this causing any issues? Absolutely not. But again, during my thorough inspection on every single vehicle that I look under, I found that that rear axle housing was again splitting in half looked at the vehicle's history, and that vehicle was from Illinois. So maybe they're a little more corrosive state with their winter dressing. I don't know what the condition or what the scenario was, but again, I have never seen that before, and that was a very surprising find. Again, let the customer know, hey, the proper repair would be replacing this rear axle assembly. Even though it's currently not causing you any issues, it could in the future if that thing were to come apart while going down the road. So just a weird one that I saw that, again, wasn't even in for that issue. Now here's kind of a new hot thing, the new Charger EVs. These are the all-electric Chargers that are finally now making their way to the dealership. These have all been sitting held in a holding lot for months and months and months, waiting to finally be released out into the wild, out to dealers. And in that time of waiting, they've come out with a rather large software update that needs to be done at the dealership. And if you watch any of these Mopar news channels, again, I don't think I'm a Mopar news channel, but if you watch any of these Mopar news channels, they've been talking over the last few days about all these Chargers bricking themselves. Now, bricking in the automotive world or in the electronics world means the software update or that electronic device has failed and basically became a brick. It's good for a brick because it now does not function. A bunch of these dealers were doing these software updates and bricking the cars and rendering them undrivable, having to get with technical support and getting software updates pushed through. We, if you didn't see, got our first Dodge Charger because I did a quick little drive around review with that. That software update is actually about 4 or 5 software updates, and it is very critical on its procedure on how you do that. It does require you to, again, go through each module in a certain order and do a certain set of key cycles. But before all of that, you need to have a few things kind of done first. That high voltage battery needs to be charged up. It doesn't need to be, down at a really low percentage. But the big important thing on any modern vehicle when you're doing software updates is the 12-volt battery has to be maintained. As you're doing a software update, you've got the key on, but the engine is not running. Or in that case, the hybrid side of things is not running, keeping that 12-volt battery charged or powered up. So we have small battery maintainers that we will always have hooked up to your 12-volt battery and maintaining that 13 volts or so as we're doing a software update. What we found on the new Charger EVs is the battery is rather small there in the back. It's a pretty small 12-volt battery that lives in the back trunk area. Now, during software updates, that small battery cannot support itself, if you will, and you need more than just a small battery maintainer. You need something that's able to put out 40 amps or more to be able to do those software updates. So a real battery charger, a charger maintainer. We've got, real test equipment there at work that we're able to hook up to batteries and have it output or hold or float voltage at 13.5 or what have you, but it's able to regulate itself and add more amps as the demand on that battery needs. So I was kind of monitoring the amperage of that output, and it was putting out 35, 40 amps to keep that 12-volt battery happy. But pending you've got a 12-volt battery that has correct amperage going to it to keep the voltage where it needs to be, all of the software updates went completely fine. I had no issues. I was able to go through step by step and do that software update procedure, and the car was totally fine. So I hate to say everybody that's having issues with them are doing them wrong or potentially not keeping that 12-volt battery where it needs to be, but I kind of think that's the issue. But I'll maybe bite my tongue on the next one we get in if it also requires that and I have some issue. But I'm claiming that it's guys trying to take shortcuts, not getting the battery hooked up and having a electrical voltage drop during those software updates. Here we are back to our tried and true 3.6 liter. Now this is in a JK, and we do see this relatively often. Your 3.6 liter JK Wrangler comes into the dealership with a O2 sensor, voltage high, voltage low, performance, whatever. It doesn't really matter. And it's often the right side bank downstream O2 sensor. So typically that is normally just an O2 sensor replacement because the circuitry, the sensor, whatever has failed and caused the sensor to go bad. But in this case with JK's, it's an oil leak causing the O2 sensor to go bad. The right side valve cover, for whatever reason, we see leak from time to time. There's a few gaskets on that. The PCV valve is back there. So there's quite a few things that can leak or seep oil. But unfortunately, the back corner of the cylinder head ends up perfectly dripping onto that O2 sensor. And after it gets oil soaked enough, it ends up killing the sensor. So in this case, I had that exact scenario with that O2 sensor code. So the Jeep not only got an O2 sensor, but we ended up with a fresh valve cover and valve cover gasket on the thing to remedy a future issue with an oil leak killing your O2 sensor. So it's always kind of weird things, and it's good to have somebody that specializes in your vehicles, because if it was just taken to any Joe Schmo shop, they might not know to be looking for that oil leak that took out your O2 sensor. So you would end up replacing the O2 sensor, and then in X amount of months, that O2 sensor is going to fail again because of that oil leak. So again, weird things that you end up finding out and learning after 16 plus years of working on the same platform, Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge stuff every single day. Now, being a Mopar technician, I always harp on, if possible, replacing with a factory OEM part. Whether that be an engine sensor, a gasket, a whatever, a computer module, I always, if possible, recommend an OEM part replacement, because we have a lot less issues with them and you aren't going to be replacing that part as soon if you were to buy a cheap aftermarket part. But I recently ran into this exact scenario with a good buddy's 2012 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and his backup camera stopped working. Did a little bit of diagnosis and testing and determined the backup camera itself was bad. We occasionally see that, not a big deal. Went to my parts department and looked up the backup camera replacement. And this small backup camera with the wire connector lead was over $500 my cost for that 2012 Grand Cherokee. And I couldn't do that to him. I told him, hey man, this thing is $500. What do you want to do? And he kind of said, well, I'd really like it because I like to hook up to my trailer when I'm towing, and it's very useful. So let's go ahead and do it. But I thought on it later that night and ended up looking online, looking on eBay, and found aftermarket backup cameras, which isn't uncommon, but the aftermarket option was like $30 on eBay for this thing. So I told him we are absolutely going to try the $30 aftermarket camera instead of going with the $500 option, because hey, if it works for a few years and it fails again, we can buy another cheap eBay camera. So pleasantly surprised with that, bought the eBay camera, bolted it in, hit reverse, and boom, we had a perfectly clear image. So that big, huge, long story was to say that there are situations or cases where even me, who only wants to put on factory parts, will even do a cheap aftermarket Chinese origin part, because when something's $500+ for something this ridiculous and small, I had to go with the aftermarket, and it worked out perfectly well. So again, there's scenarios where we can do aftermarket and it's perfectly fine. Now, last but not least, I thought we would start doing a new segment here on the new series, and that's the tool of the week. So today we've got the Lyle. They do have this trim panel popper. This is the 35400 trim panel popper. And I use this thing for absolutely everything. Now, you would think, well, sure, you use it interior on trim panels. Well, yes, but I use this thing for engine sensor, connector removal. I mean, I use this thing on absolutely everything. Again, doing engine repairs, all of those plastic red safety clips or the lock tabs on those connectors, I'm grabbing this thing every single time and popping those loose, getting the connector off. The Christmas tree wiring clips is what I call them. This works absolutely amazingly for those. So if you don't have one of these and you often do engine, interior, or literally anything automotive, this is an absolutely must-have tool. I will have a link down in the description to the Amazon listing. The thing's really darn cheap. I've got a couple, one at work, one here, because like I said, I use this for absolutely everything. So if you don't have one, go ahead and click the link, grab you one or two, because they are an absolute lifesaver on, again, wiring harnesses, interior trim. It's just the list or the uses are endless with this thing. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed this week in the shop and some of the weird things that I saw as a Mopar technician here. Let me know down in the comments, what weird things have you ran across on your personal vehicles? An oil leak causing your O2 sensor to fail, whatever. Let me know down in the comments what is the most, again, interesting, weird thing that you guys have ran into in your automotive repair life. And guys, I will hopefully see you here next weekend with the next week's weird issues and problems and repairs that go on in a Mopar shop, guys. So, as I always say, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.